Welcome to the Korea Pro podcast. I'm your host, Chungmin Kim, the editorial director of Korea Pro.
And I'm John Lee, the editor of Korea Pro.
Join us for a weekly 15-minute conversation as we dive into the most pressing stories shaping South Korea and dissect the most complicated ones for you.
From politics to culture, technology to society, we've got you covered. So stay ahead of the curve and never be sidelined again.
So get ready for a fresh perspective on South Korea's news. This is the Korea Pro podcast.
All right, everyone, welcome back to the Korea Pro podcast. It is Thursday, October 10th. And President Yoon has had a very busy schedule this past week. He's been in Southeast Asia this whole time. And I'm joined by our junior news correspondent, Joon Ha. Joon Ha, you've been paying close attention to the president's whereabouts and his movements and his activities. Can you tell us what he's been doing? Let's start in the Philippines.
Yeah, so Yoon started his visit to the Philippines on Sunday for a state visit. It's quite a commemorative visit. It's to mark the 75th anniversary of diplomatic relations between the two countries. He met with the Philippine president, Ferdinand Marcos Jr., on Monday, and they agreed to elevate their bilateral relationship to a strategic partnership during their talks.
Now, what does that mean exactly when they say that they're going to elevate it to a strategic partnership?
So Yoon's visit to the Philippines, it quite, just to answer that question, it signals quite a key intent from Seoul to deepen a strategic and economic tie with Southeast Asia beyond its reliance on Vietnam. And it also signals a defense cooperation between the two countries.
Okay, but if I'm not mistaken, there was also some kind of mention about nuclear power cooperation, right?
That's true. So while South Korea and the Philippines, they also signed a memorandum of understanding for the nuclear power plant in Bataan for a feasibility study to see if that nuclear power plant is safe. It's never actually been used. So it remains to be seen if the facility is fit for use from South Korea and also the Philippines. And it's unclear if Marcos has the political capital to push the project going forward. You know, while Marcos, he does enjoy a higher approval rate than Yoon at 65%, it is still a significant drop from his 80% approval rate in June.
Sure. So that whole nuclear power plant deal, that's really up in the air. But we have to mention that what is a little bit more certain is the minerals deals that the South Korea and the Philippines will have. The Philippines is very rich in mineral resources like nickel and cobalt, and those are very important for electric vehicle batteries. And so that's something that South Korean automobile companies are going to be really interested in. But let's move on. Let's talk about his next leg of the journey, Singapore.
Yeah, so Singapore was on October 10th, and he kind of upgraded the strategic partnership that was planned for.
Partnership, sure.
Absolutely, yeah. So planned for 2025, which is the 50th anniversary of the two countries' relations. He's also kind of looked into strengthening the economic cooperations between the two nations, kind of reflecting both nations' intent to deepen cooperations in key areas such as energy security, trade, and technological innovation.
Specifically, LNG, liquefied natural gas. Now, we have to point out that Singapore is just like Korea, doesn't have a lot of natural resources, but it is a trade hub.
Absolutely.
And so I'm assuming that this is what the real agreement was, to facilitate trade between these two countries, especially when it comes to LNG.
Yeah, so the LNG cooperation with Singapore, as you said, it is a major global trading hub, and it will provide South Korea with greater flexibility in managing its natural gas imports, and also the conflict in the Middle East. It raises concerns about the supply chain, especially for global energy.
And oil prices, they've been fluctuating because of the conflict there, yes.
So it will be a reliable LNG trading partner in Singapore for Seoul.
Okay, but now it's the final leg of his journey. He went to Laos for the ASEAN summit. And this time he said that he was we keep saying this phrase, comprehensive strategic partnership, but this time with the entire ASEAN bloc.
Yeah, so his focus areas there were trade, technology, security, and supply chain resilience.
Which is the same thing that he's been saying in both the Philippines and Singapore.
Exactly, and I think he's really trying to hit that one home, especially in additionally, a collaboration with smart cities, artificial intelligence, and also green energy. And he's also signed a maritime security commitment based on the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea.
That was part of the joint statement, right? The maritime security commitment. But that was the part where I just was a little surprised that he would go so far as to mention Unclos. And we have to remember that, yes, countries like Vietnam and the Philippines will very much be in favor of South Korea's support of Unclos because they've got their maritime disputes with China. But, you know, He's in Laos right now. In Laos, along with other countries like, for instance, Cambodia, these countries are heavily indebted to China, and they are not going to want to do anything that upsets Beijing. And so the fact that he went all the way to Laos and mentioned Unclos while there, I thought that was quite surprising, to be honest.
Well, I think that he's like trying to aim at kind of advancing South Korea's Indo-Pacific strategy. So it's aimed at strengthening the economic ties with Southeast Asian nations and diversifying the partnerships to reduce the SEA countries' dependence on China. Now, when you look at that from a defense standpoint, also, it could lead to some tie and chills with Beijing.
Okay, now that you've mentioned defense, okay, so he did talk about his reunification policy and all that, but that's more North Korea related stuff, so we'll leave our NK News and NK Pro colleagues to delve into that more deeply. But because you mentioned defense, we had to talk about what happened in Korea while the president was away. The Minister of Defense has also been a bit busy.
Yeah, so the Minister of Defense, just today actually, he was meeting with the Japanese defense minister for the first time through a teleconference. And it's the first talk since Japan's new cabinet and new defense chief took office on October 1st. There was quite an emphasis on bilateral and trilateral cooperation with the United States, and also their joint response to North Korea's military cooperation with Russia.
Okay, all right. So they haven't met yet, but it is a good start.
It's a good start. And just moving on to the next topic. So there was quite a significant financial development in the news, and you also wrote an analysis about this.
This was very big news, and it was also unexpected. Well, I don't know how, if other experts had seen this coming, but I was quite surprised when I saw this news. What happened was that the FTSE, the Russell World Government Bond Index, they decided to include South Korea's bonds into their index. And this was announced yesterday being Wednesday, October 9th. And South Korea is not going to be part of this index immediately. It's going to be included in November 2025. So there is a 1 year period where South Korea still has to wait. But it has been announced that South Korea will be part of this list. Now, this is a huge deal because what this allows to happen is that South Korean bonds will finally be up in a global index like the FTSE. And that means that global investors will be able to invest in South Korean bonds, will be able to buy them up pretty quickly and much more easily. Now, I'm not sure how this figure was calculated, but according to some experts, they believe that this could help South Korea attract up to $67 billion in investments once South Korea has been put up on this index. Now, $67 billion is a huge chunk of money. This can go into a lot of different things. It could help to improve the liquidity in the government bond market. It can also really lower the borrowing costs for the South Korean government. For instance, we can talk about KEPCO. KEPCO is heavily in debt right now, and it needs to borrow money to become more operational, to become more profitable, but it has had a hard time trying to attract all those funds and also trying to borrow money. But with these kinds of bonds, it'll be able to have access to more money much more quickly. And we have to really applaud the South Korean government for actually finally getting this done. This has been years in the making. If I recall correctly, even President Moon Jae-in wanted to have this done, wanted to have South Korea up in the FTSE and also get South Korea elevated to a developed market status by the MSCI, which stands for the Morgan Stanley Capital International. But MSCI is still an ongoing matter. But when it comes to the FTSE, the Yoon administration should be applauded because a lot of it had to do with abolishing these kinds of regulations that made it very difficult for international investors to invest in South Korea. For example, one of the things that the Yoon administration abolished was the investor registration certificate, which was a certificate that foreign investors needed to acquire to even just buy and sell, bonds and stocks and what have you. And because they got rid of that, it became much more easier for international investors to finally invest, which is why the FTSE said, okay, your reforms have been good enough, and I think it deserves to be in the FTSE World Index now. And so here we are.
Right. So it looks like South Korea, as you mentioned, will be included into the FTSE to begin in November 2025. It's a little over 1 year until it comes into fruition. What is the challenges and risks that are facing?
That 1 year is not a coincidence. Well, that's the whole thing. South Korea has a 1 year grace period to finally be included into this list. But one of the things we have to remember that this 1 year period is a grace period, essentially. This is not a done and done deal.
Sure.
The FTSE can say, sure, we've seen some of your reforms and we were happy with it, but in other parts of your reforms, they were not actually happening, or there were some reversals that we don't like. And so during this next coming year, South Korea is going to try to, it has to focus on further economic reforms. And one of the things that it has to reform is President Yoon's own short selling ban. The short selling ban has been in place for quite a while now, and the rationale for it was that short sellers were just dumping stocks whenever they smell blood in the water, and this really had an effect on South Korean corporation stock values. But because of this ban, a lot of investors are saying, well, some companies rely on short selling to make a profit, and also short selling is not a complete evil. It also has not price fixing, but rather price correcting mechanisms.
Right.
And so because the short selling is still banned, there are some people in the world who are saying South Korea's market is not a developed market just yet. And as we just mentioned, there's the MSCI. The MSCI still considers South Korea a developing market, not a developed one, in spite of South Korea trying for a long time to try to get that developed market status. And so there are going to be quite a lot of additional economic reforms that South Korea will really need to pursue. But we have to remember that President Yoon can't do this thing by himself.
No.
He needs cooperation from the opposition. And the opposition is not listening because Yoon is not listening to the opposition on other matters, which we've talked about in this podcast many times. But anyway, that's the FTSE news.
Introducing Korea Pro, your all-in-one South Korea intelligence solution. Start each day with our executive briefing on the most crucial issue and a snapshot of key Korean and international headlines. Gain deeper understanding through our original analysis on South Korea's economy, politics, security and society. Our Monday Week Ahead newsletter prepares you for upcoming business and political events, while the weekly podcast keeps you informed on recent developments. Get clear, actionable business intelligence every day. Visit koreapro.org/podcast and never be sidelined again.
Before we end, as usual, let's talk about the week ahead. Now, the government audits began this week. I believe it was the foreign and defense ministries that were really audited in the National Assembly this week. Other ministries will be audited next week as well, including the finance committees. And the BOK will be involved as well. And also, next week, October 16th, that's when we're going to see local by-elections, which will be held in Busan, Incheon, and the South Jeolla province, where they're going to be choosing their local government leaders. And in Seoul, they're going to be choosing a new education superintendent. So there's going to be a lot of things happening next week as well. And if you want more of this information, all of this information will be compiled for you very neatly in a week ahead newsletter, which will get out to you by Monday afternoon. So if you'd like to know more, please subscribe. All right, you all have a good weekend now.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in.
If you want to know more, sign up for our daily executive briefings. We brief you on all you need to know from the past 24 hours and why they matter every morning in your inboxes.
Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast for your weekly dose of insight. And until next time, I'm Jungmin Kim.
And I'm John Lay. Stay connected, stay informed, and we'll see you next time on the Korea Pro Podcast.